There are dozens of complicated justifications why no third party ever really made it in presidential elections, and there is one simple. In this video, I will reveal to you a few, and of course the main reason I think third parties do not exist, or let's just say do not win in the United States. This is Ross Perot, and Ross Perot was uncontent with the two big parties in the United States, the Republican and the Democratic Party. He wanted to lead America into a new direction. In 1992, he decided to run for president without a party. In a TV interview, someone asked Ross Perot whether he'd like to run for president. Firstly, he said no, but later in the show he said that he might run for president if ordinary people bring him on the ballots in all 50 states. Sounds quite decent, doesn't it? And in the end, he actually ran for president. So will a candidate without a party stand a chance in a presidential election, even though the last time the American president was neither Republican nor Democratic was before the Republican Party was founded? In 1992, the last time the third party candidate had won a single state in presidential elections was 24 years earlier in 1968. Just to make it easier, I will call everyone in this video a third party candidate who is neither Republican nor Democratic, even though some of them do not belong to a party. If you ask me, there was never a third party candidate who was close to winning a presidential election. One might argue against this, and it's okay, but my point is actually there were times where other parties dominated the United States, but in general I'd say the presidential elections were always won by the two biggest parties at the according time. So before running for president as a third party candidate, Perot had several difficulties. And next to the big challenge that Perot had to convince the people that they have to throw away what they've had for, back then, 140 years, he needed to get on the ballots in every single state. I think that's the point where most third party candidates already fail. Running for president does not forcefully mean that one's name is put on the ballots in every single state. In some states it is actually possible to write anyone's name on the ballots, but I don't have to tell you this doesn't motivate people to vote for a candidate because many people are simply afraid to lose their votes. Furthermore, in some states this is not legal, so if you don't make it on the ballots in those states, there's simply no chance to win the state, to get any votes in the state. Many people supported Perot, that's what polls show. The point is, I think many people were afraid that they waste their votes because the third party candidates do not have a chance anyway. And then it's a kind of circle. I'd actually like to vote for the third party, but no one else is going to, therefore I'm not going to do it either. I have to say one thing. I'm not going to judge whether the two-party system is good or bad in this video. I just say that this is the way it is, and I'm going to explain why I think that it is the way it is. So next to the one big reason I'm still going to reveal by the end of the video, there are a few others. For example, I think that many people vote out of tradition, maybe a family tradition, always the same party, for example the Democratic or the Republican Party. Furthermore, the Democratic and the Republican Party can prove themselves. Not everyone likes them, not everyone likes the way they do politics, but they have the chance to convince people with the way they do politics. Third parties do not have the chance to prove themselves because where do they govern? In those third parties there are of course some former politicians from the two big parties, but they also do not have so many experienced people behind them. I think those two big parties who have ruled the country for over 150 years now simply look more trustworthy than any other party. For Perot, the good news was that he made it on the ballots in all the 50 states. His candidacy received lots of attention. There were times where he was doing extremely well in the polls. And then he dropped out of the race. Probably he thought that he wouldn't have a chance anyway. I mean, what would have happened if Perot had won this election as a third party candidate? Maybe he'd be president of the United States, but the Congress is still ruled by the two big parties. Usually, the president suggests something, his own party agrees, the other party disagrees, and maybe someone is willing to make a compromise. I mean, what shall a president do if he doesn't have any supporters in the Congress? There would always be the need to convince more than 50% of the people in the Congress. Maybe it was people's disappointment about Perot dropping out of the race that made him actually re-enter the race. One big problem is also that third parties do not have the financial opportunities a big party has for serious advertising. There's simply not enough money. And that was where Ross Perot saw his chance. I do think that leaving the race costed him many votes. I don't know whether Perot really could have won this election. What we should know about Perot is that he was a billionaire, and therefore he simply used his own money to pay for advertising. Perot bought TV slots for half an hour and used this time to explain his motivation to become President of the United States. And unlike other third-party candidates, he was also invited to the TV debate. Since 1853, the American president was always either Republican or Democratic. But some other elections were won by third-party candidates. In 2006, Joey Lieberman won as the third-party candidate the seat for the Senate in Connecticut. Whenever I pronounce anything incorrectly, please let me know in the comments. But besides the fact that it was 14 years later, Perot couldn't have adapted his strategy anyway. Problem? Lieberman was already a senator for Connecticut from the Democratic Party. Because of differences, the Democratic Party had decided not to renominate him. What the Democratic Party probably didn't expect was that Perot would simply run for the Senate himself as an independent candidate. And he won the election. The best part about the story is that there was only one seat difference. And therefore Joey Lieberman, the man the Democratic Party turned against, became the make or break factor. As far as I know, he still stayed quite loyal to the Democratic Party. But another third-party candidate, who wasn't already a state senator, won an important election. In 1998, Jesse Ventura applied for the office of governor of Minnesota. Just like every third-party candidate, people didn't really think that he'd have a big chance. But he won people's trust. He gained support, and in the end, he won the election. Actually, one might think that Perot was at the right place at the right time. I think the Republican Party was very weak that year. Normally, I'd say business people back then rather went to the Republican Party, but I think George Bush wasn't really popular under business people, for example because of the read my lips new taxes thing. Perot as a successful businessman could have been the answer to this. Now, the day of the election came and Perot obviously lost. Furthermore, he didn't win a single state, but he had more votes than any other third-party candidate in the 20th century, except for Theodore Roosevelt, who ran for president with the third party after his 8 years as president for the Republican Party. I think because of the fact that Roosevelt was already president, we cannot compare this. Now I think the big point why Ross Perot's candidacy worked out so well were the TV spots and his financial opportunities. He had about 20 million votes, which is very much. His media presence worked out. It simply didn't work out enough. He stayed the number 3, but he was an awesome number 3. In the end, Bill Clinton was still the most popular candidate. Was he? Well, some exit polls indicate that Perot would have had much bigger chances and maybe even could have won the election if everyone had voted for the candidate they really supported. Many people said that they would have voted for Perot, but they thought that he simply would have no chance. In the end, I can imagine that Perot would have been the most popular candidate if he hadn't dropped out of the race, but by dropping out of the race, he literally said that people need to believe in something he doesn't really believe in himself. And I think that's what made it so difficult for Perot to get more votes. Winning this election, I'm not sure. What those polls clearly indicate is that many people do not vote for third parties because they do not believe that they will have a chance. The elections show that this is not that wrong. But looking at other countries, this cannot be the main reason, because in many other countries, more than 2 parties actually exist. Now we come to the big point I consider to be the main reason no third party exists in the United States, and it's simply the election system. Comparing the election system, for example, to France, in 2017, Emmanuel Macron won as a candidate of a party he had founded in 2016. Now what's the difference between the American and the French election system? Well, in France there is no such thing as an electoral college. Point is that a candidate needs at least 50% of the votes. Ross Perot was at least in 1 state second, I think in 2 states Ross Perot was second, but it didn't use him anything because only the winner gets the points. In France, this is different. There's a first election where dozens of people take part in it. If no candidate immediately gets 50% of the votes, the second election is made between the 2 candidates who had most votes in the first election. And therefore, people can vote for their favorite candidate in the first election, because every vote is firstly a vote against the person they want least. Now in the United States, if someone neither likes the Republican or the Democratic Party, they can go for a third party, or got to say, okay, this is still the better option. That's what you can do in the second election between the two candidates. Then you can go for the better option. In the first election, you can go for the candidate you support most because it's a vote avoiding that the candidate you want least gets the 50%. In the United States, you either win completely or you lose completely. And I think that's the big point why people decide against third-party candidates, because they want to assure that they do not get the worst option. If Perot had won as an independent candidate, it might have changed history. Maybe it might have changed the two-party system. But looking at other third-party candidates and Perot's own candidacy 4 years later, not half of the votes he got in 1992, we have to say that Perot was a one-hit wonder. At the beginning of the 21st century, Perot became a member of the Republican Party himself, and in 2019 he died because of leukemia. I'm not going to comment on Perot's political ideas because I rarely do this, but what I can say is that the person Ross Perot actually impressed me. Do you think the same? Let me know in the comments, please. And if you want more content about American history, you might be interested in this video here, where I found 13 coincidences between Donald Trump and John F. Kennedy. Thank you for watching.